Thanks very much once again. And I'd like to hand over now to Charlie Jardine. Charlie is the founder and chief exec of EO Charging, a super exciting UK startup in the charging infrastructure space. Charlie, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us here this morning on this Schneider Electric EV Summit online series event.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks very much indeed, Charlie. And so as an opening gambit question, I know you founded EO Charging around 6 years ago now. Could you give us a sense of the changes you've seen in that time on the transition to the electrification of transport?
Yeah. So we started EO in 2015, and at the time there were very few electric vehicles in the market. Nissan Leaf, Renault Zoe, there was the G-Wiz was still knocking around. And actually the vehicles were being bought mostly by consumers. So from our point of view, a lot of the charging stations that we've sold up to this point have been the home charging stations. So obviously if you buy an electric vehicle for yourself, you're going to try, if you have a driveway, to charge at home. And that has been our market. And there's actually been the majority of EVs that have been sold have been to consumers. I'd say back end of last year and certainly this year, despite COVID, the shift has really changed. So the shift really is moved on to fleet. And for us, fleet includes obviously companies that give employees vehicles, and in the same vein, those vehicles are being taken home to people's driveways. And those vehicles are often cars, but of course, in the case of DPD, those vehicles are vans. And actually that drive has been heavily led by the government. So if you look at things like the benefit in kind incentives on electric versus petrol and diesel, benefit in kind on an EV is about, it's 0% versus up to 37% on petrol and diesel. So for an employee, having moved now into an electric vehicle, I can save myself hundreds of pounds per month on benefit in kind tax. So for us, again, it's this year certainly that shift to businesses adopting vehicles has really taken place, and that is not just cars going back to people's driveways and potentially even charging it in the workplace, but it's also this emerging van and truck market. So obviously, Ollie's done a great job at DPD and has got plenty of electric vans on his fleet, but he's still one of very few. So from an EO point of view, we're certainly seeing big companies who've got large fleets of vans and trucks starting to shift to electric, mostly driven by the fact there's now vehicles available on the market at the right price point. And of course, the surrounding climate is really encouraging businesses to make the shift quickly.
Very good. Thanks very much indeed for that opening gambit. So you mentioned the fleet side, the significance of that. We've certainly seen lots of energy and interest with some of the larger leasing companies. Presumably you've been engaging at EO Charging with some of the leasing companies to open up those opportunities. Yeah,
I mean, we work with a handful of leasing companies, and of course, they've sold many more electric cars this year than they've ever done before. And if you just look at some of the statistics from lockdown, of course, the overall sales of vehicles has dropped quite significantly. But the percentage of electric vehicles versus other vehicles like diesel and petrol is starting to outweigh those ICE vehicles, particularly diesel. For us, we work with leasing companies, as you say. We also work direct with fleets. So working direct with fleets, not that we work with DPD, but for example, they've got very ambitious plans, and they're pretty aggressive. And so for us, we try and work with businesses, preferably when they start thinking about going electric. So helping them with that feasibility. If the first question is, I want to go electric, and actually, is there a vehicle that suits my needs? The second question is often, if I do make that switch, how the heck am I going to charge them? So whilst our business is focused on selling chargers and software, actually, yeah, we do a lot more than that. It's about providing that upfront consultation. It's looking at the feasibility of going electric. It's working out what kind of infrastructure you're going to need and where. You know, is depot charging or workplace charging sufficient, or are you going to need to give employees charging stations at home? So that feasibility then leads obviously into providing chargers and software, and in order to do that really well, we have to install the equipment and look after it.
Very good. It sounds like you are verging on becoming a management consultant for electric vehicle charging, as well as delivering the hardware.
We're much cheaper, by the way.
Yeah, perhaps. So, I mean, some of the numbers to pick up on in terms of the growth of battery electric vehicles, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the SMMT here in the UK, recently announced that battery electric vehicles have increased by a cool 184.3% in terms of sales this September compared to last September. So, you know, we're all benefiting from some incredible growth in the sector. You've mentioned a lot about passenger vehicles and fleets, and you've touched on vans and trucks. Do you see the vans and trucks sector as an exciting growth sector?
Yeah, for us and our business, we love doing charging stations and depots for vans and trucks. So, yeah, historically in that segment, you've had some kind of startup niche vehicle providers, or even vehicle converters, so converting what used to be petrol diesel vehicles into electric. And yeah, you had people like Sam Clark at Newt Cargo, or formerly Newt Cargo, who had what was a very large electric fleet at the time. He had about 80 to 100 vehicles. And once upon a time, that was the biggest electric vehicle fleet, van fleet in the country. Now, most of those vehicles were not from mainstream OEMs. What you're starting to see now, in the small van space, but also in the big van and up to small truck, is you've actually got mainstream OEMs either with product on the market or with product due to launch. So you're seeing entry from people like Fiat, VW, Ford, and yeah, for a big fleet who's got many thousands of vehicles, a key consideration is not just the product and how many miles does it do and how much does it cost, but it's also about the support network. So, you know, these things are now mission critical, both obviously the vehicles, but actually the charging stations, and having the right support network in place so that when and if things do go wrong, you can get them fixed quickly, is a massive consideration to any company wanting to go electric at scale. So I think, you know, certainly from our perspective, we're seeing that transition happen now. And there's you see every single day big press releases or commitments, and people are actually receiving vehicles. So we think it's really exciting. And yeah, look, if you're hesitant about going electric in the van and truck space, I think you need to look at the internet and see what's now currently available.
And also, as well as the incumbents, some exciting new startups like Volta Trucks in the 16-ton truck category. And obviously, the vans and truck sector is a powerful vector for decarbonising transport in a way that is perhaps more interesting than the passenger vehicle space. So thanks very much indeed for that. Again, if there are any questions from the online audience, and there are many coming in, then please do pose those questions to Charlie. I'll open up to online questions to Charlie in a moment. But first, a couple more questions from me. The software side, Charlie. So you're typically known as being a hardware business, but I understand the software side of things is an increasingly interesting business proposition for you at EOCharge. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing on the software side?
Yeah, sure. So when we look at fleet, we look at two types of customers. So one is a van fleet that does last mile delivery, even maybe middle mile. But those vehicles are going into cities, delivering parcels or food or furniture, and they go back to a central depot and park up for 8 to 10 hours. So if you start to think about, I'm a big fleet, I've got 100, 200 plus vehicles going back to a depot at night, which are currently petrol and diesel, and I want to switch those to electric. Well, clearly there's a significant consideration about power and the feasibility of doing that. So from an EO point of view, just making smart plugs that charge and maybe do some kind of on-site load management. What we're starting to think about and provide in our software is more of an integrated solution. So if you can envisage a depot with 100 or 200 fans, they go and deliver parcels during the day, they come back at roughly 5 o'clock, they plug in, that's a huge surge in power. So how does EO help the customer manage that? So firstly, you've got a device that sits on site, looks at what the building is using. So what's the building currently using, and therefore what's currently available to charge the vehicles. So that's really helpful. The second thing is some of those vehicles are doing 50 miles a day, some are only doing 20, and some might be doing more like 80. And each of those vehicles has got a variable daily mileage. They also might need to leave at different times in the morning. So if you start to think about, I've got a power supply that wasn't designed for charging lots of electric vehicles at the same time. So EO's got this neat load management solution, but actually you've now got energy tariffs that are what we call time of use, so expensive at 5 p.m. and much, much cheaper at midnight, for example. If EO understands from the vehicles the state of charge of the battery when they each plug in, and then we understand the departure time, and we know that energy is much cheaper at midnight rather than 5 p.m., and we know because of the load management system, we've got X amount of power to work with, and then you start to apply some machine learning to work out how the buildings and the charging stations are being used, you can then look to create a priority, which is I'm going to charge these vehicles in this order and make sure they're charged by the morning with the power supply they've got. But I'll try and do that at the cheapest price. So from a software point of view, what's EO doing in that space? It's presenting that data in a really nice, clean dashboard that the guys on site will use, but also then think about once my fleet's transitioned to electric, how do I optimize the cost? And the nice thing about EVs, which is different to petrol, is you've got such an opportunity to influence refueling price. So time of use tariffs could be a third of the price, and that's new with EVs. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Questions you've never asked yourself: how much does petrol or diesel cost at 10 o'clock in the morning? So interesting new framework of analysis. So Charlie, thanks so much indeed for that. Final question from me before I throw things open to some online questions from the audience. The software side perhaps gives you opportunities for international growth. Could you tell us a little bit more about your plans for international growth?
Yeah, so with the software in mind, we've made the platform what we call hardware agnostic. So that means with the software, you might integrate other people's chargers onto it. So we've integrated ABB, chargers from ABB, chargers from Alfin, and we've got a large customer who wants us in Europe, and we're now supplying software as a service, 24/7 support and maintenance into Germany, France, Italy, Spain. So from an EO point of view, we've built this product and software, but actually the turnkey delivery model, which is the consultation up front, the installation, the maintenance, and we've built that for the UK. We've now got a customer and other customers asking us for that same service in Europe. So from an international point of view, whilst we sell chargers currently into 30 countries, this is a different model. So this is going in with a customer and deploying that turnkey solution. For us, that's a big step forward. And we started that this year, and next year you'll see us grow even further into Europe.
Very good. Thanks so much indeed. So I'll ask some questions from the online audience now. You mentioned the growth of the passenger vehicle market at the outset. someone's asked a question about cost and the prohibitive nature of cost. They ask, when do you envisage prices starting to become competitive with combustion and diesel engine vehicles?
Yeah, I think, with any vehicle, whether it's petrol or diesel, you've got quite a large span of costs. So you can get a very cheap petrol diesel vehicle for a few thousand, where you can pay a premium, get a lovely vehicle for 100. Now, if you look at EVs, you're actually starting to see electric vehicles, which we'd regard as obviously affordable, but also has cost parity to a nice alternative. So if you look at new entrants and people like MG, Hyundai, Kia, actually the price of those vehicles, we'd say are comparable with an ICE equivalent. And the benefit of an electric vehicle is, and actually the key consideration you've got to make at this point is, it's not just about the upfront price, it's about what we'd call TCO, so total cost of ownership. So yes, the vehicle might cost you a little bit more upfront, but actually if you own that vehicle for 3, 5, 7 years, and actually your refueling cost is 1/10 of the price, and you live in London, so you're not paying congestion charge, and it's a company car, so my benefit in kind is 0% rather than 20%. And you can layer on all of these costs, including the fact that EVs are much cheaper to maintain. Actually, EVs are cheaper. Yeah, so it's hard not to look at the upfront price like the EasyJet model. But I think you've got to look a bit deeper than that with electric vehicles.